What if I told you that for the indigenous peoples of the American prairies, clear skies were a harbinger of greater danger than a fierce snowstorm? We tend to think of winter as the harshest test for people living in harmony with nature. However, for the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche, the real enemy often came not in the form of white flakes, but in the form of icy raindrops. This invisible danger required special knowledge and instant reaction to survive just one night. Watch the video to the end to find out how one wet skin could be a death sentence and what tricks the Indians used to cheat the laws of thermodynamics. First, I will reveal a secret that completely changes the perception of life in the wild. It is important to understand the difference between how our body reacts to dry frost and wet cold. Contrary to popular belief, snow is an excellent insulator that retains heat and keeps you dry. Rain, on the other hand, has the unique ability to penetrate any cracks and instantly draw heat away from the human body. The thermal conductivity of water is almost 25 times higher than that of air, which turns a light shower into a deadly trap. Native Americans knew this rule of physics long before textbooks appeared and treated dampness with the utmost caution. Life on the Great Plains in the fall and spring was a series of encounters with icy winds and sudden precipitation. If a warrior got soaked to the skin at temperatures just above freezing, his chances of surviving until dawn plummeted. Deerskin clothing, so effective against the wind, turned into a heavy, cold lump that literally sucked the energy out of the muscles. In such conditions, even the strongest man could lose consciousness from hypothermia in just a few hours. Snow can be shaken off, but water absorbed into the fibers of the skin cannot be removed without prolonged heat. That is why the nomads of the plains considered the prolonged autumn rains to be the most dangerous time for the tribe. Particular attention was paid to protecting the extremities, as this is where heat escapes most quickly. Wet moccasins were the main cause of serious health problems on long journeys. When wet buffalo leather became slippery and lost its shape, making it difficult to move over rough terrain. If a warrior could not quickly build a fire and dry his shoes, the risk of frostbite increased even at above freezing temperatures. It sounds paradoxical, but human tissues suffer much more in high humidity. All the wisdom of survival boiled down to one simple rule: stay dry at all costs. Do you think rain in the steppe can be considered a more insidious enemy than open flames? Write about it in the comments below this video. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new details about the lives of indigenous peoples. Want to know the main secret of the sustainability of Native American dwellings? The teepee, a conical tent made of buffalo hides, was the pinnacle of engineering design among the nomadic peoples of the Great Plains. Its shape was not accidental. It allowed it to effectively withstand the powerful gusts of wind that often accompany rainstorms. Thanks to the slope of the walls, raindrops rolled down without lingering on the surface of the skin. Inside such a house, a special microclimate was created that allowed people to stay warm even in the most inclement weather. However, without the proper adjustment of the smoke vents, the teepee could turn into a cold and damp sack. The central place in the teepee was occupied by a hearth, which served not only for cooking, but also for drying the air. A constant stream of warm air rose upward, creating excess pressure that prevented moisture from entering through the smoke hole. To prevent rain from extinguishing the fire, special adjustable valves called smoke ears were used at the top. Using long poles, the Indians could turn them so that the wind would not blow drops inside. This required skill and constant attention throughout the night. If the wind changed direction, the person on duty had to immediately adjust the position of the valves. During prolonged rains, the buffalo hides that made up the teepee's covering began to absorb moisture. This made the dwelling very heavy, but at the same time, the pores of the skin swelled, blocking air access and making the tent airtight. The heat from the fire inside the teepee caused the moisture to evaporate from the outer surface of the hides, creating a steam bath effect outside. Inside, a stable temperature was maintained, allowing people to rest and recover their strength. A properly installed teepee could withstand a storm lasting several days without a single leak into the living space. It was a real fortress made of organic materials. However, if the tribe was on the move and did not have time to set up a full-fledged camp, the situation became critical. In such cases, Temporary shelters made of branches and blankets were used, which were much less effective at keeping out water. Experienced chiefs always tried to predict the weather by the behavior of animals and the shape of clouds. They knew that delaying setting up camp before a storm could cost the lives of the weakest members of the community. There was no room for complacency on the prairies when it came to water from the sky. Are you ready to learn how Native Americans used ordinary fat to make their clothing impervious to rain? You've definitely never heard of this unique secret. To combat moisture, Native Americans developed a complex system for treating leather, which we would today call chemical impregnation. The main ingredient here was fat extracted from the bone marrow of buffalo or bears. By rubbing it thoroughly into the surface of the leather, the craftsmen ensured that water simply rolled off the clothing without being absorbed into the fibers. This process was long and laborious, but it was vital for every hunter. The oiled leather became stiffer, but it retained heat even in the heaviest downpour. In addition to fat, leather was often smoked over a fire made from certain types of wood. The smoke contained formaldehyde and resins, which penetrated deep into the structure of the material and created a protective layer. This leather acquired a characteristic golden brown hue and a specific smell that repelled insects and water. Smoked leather did not stiffen after getting wet and drying, remaining soft and elastic. This was critically important for moccasins and light jackets, which had to fit snugly to the body. Every woman in the tribe knew her smoking secrets, passed down from generation to generation. In some regions, such as the Northeast, the Iroquois used tree bark, particularly birch bark, for protection from the rain. They made cloaks and raincoats out of it, which were completely waterproof. Birch bark does not rot and does not let water through, making it an ideal material for forest conditions. Such capes were easy to fold and took up little space on a hike, becoming indispensable companions for forest hunters. On the plains where there were few trees, people relied exclusively on the products of hunting. Careful preparation of each item of clothing was the key to longevity in a harsh world. The Indians also knew that certain types of fur repelled water better than others. Otter, or beaver fur, was highly prized for its natural water-repellent properties. It was used to make collars and hats that protected the head and neck, the most critical areas for heat loss. The combination of different materials allowed them to create multi-layered protection that could withstand any weather conditions. It was a real-life support system honed by centuries of practice. Like this video if you are amazed by how deeply indigenous peoples understood the properties of the materials around them. What you are about to learn will change your perception of Native American life. A cold, rainy night was a time of great tension for the entire camp. The main task was to keep the fire burning and make sure that water did not accumulate under the sleeping areas. Sleep in such conditions was light and short, as the slightest carelessness could lead to disaster. People slept on raised platforms or on thick layers of dry grass and skins so as not to come into contact with the cooling ground. Every movement was aimed at conserving the energy accumulated during the day. Inside the tipi, someone always stayed awake during a storm, keeping the coals burning evenly. A strong fire was undesirable, as it could cause too much draft and draw cold drops inside through the smoke hole. The ideal was to smolder dense logs of hardwood, which gave off a lot of infrared heat. This heat dried the air and the clothes hanging on poles under the dome. Night duty was a sacred responsibility on which the health of all family members depended. If the fire went out, the temperature inside the teepee would drop to street level in just a few minutes. Children and the elderly were always placed in the center of the teepee, closest to the heat source and furthest from the damp walls. They were covered with the warmest and driest skins, often using buffalo fur obtained in the middle of winter. This fur is so thick that it retains heat even when its surface is slightly damp. Adults often sacrificed their comfort to ensure the safety of the younger members. This social structure allowed tribes to maintain their numbers even in the most unfavorable years. Survival was a collective process where everyone knew their role and responsibility. By morning, if the rain had not stopped, the camp would turn into an island amid endless grayness. Hunting and gathering became impossible, and the tribes switched to a resource-saving mode. People spent their time telling stories, passing on legends and knowledge to the sound of falling raindrops. Rain forced the tribe to unite, turning each teepee into a small fortress of human will. But what happened if rain caught a person far from home, alone with nature? In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans survived alone without a roof over their heads. When a warrior found himself far from camp during a rainstorm, his first task was to find natural shelter. This could be rock shelters, thickets of bushes, or fallen trees. It was important to find a place that was protected from direct exposure to water, and more importantly, from the wind. Wind increases the cooling effect of water several times over, turning simple wetness into deadly cold. An experienced tracker could build a temporary shelter out of branches and bark in just half an hour, using only a knife and knowledge of the forest. The main rule was not to sit on bare ground, which quickly takes away heat. Instead, bedding made of coniferous branches or dry grass was used to create an insulating layer. If it was possible to build a tiny fire, it was placed so that the heat was reflected from the back wall of the shelter onto the person's back. This allowed them to maintain their body temperature at a critical level without using a lot of firewood. In the prairies where firewood is scarce, the Indians used dry buffalo dung, which continued to burn even in light rain. This fuel was a real lifesaver for those who found themselves in a treeless area. Another technique was to use large pieces of bark, which were placed under clothing in the chest and back area. The bark served as an additional barrier to water and helped to keep vital organs warm. The Indians also knew which plants could be chewed for extra energy and to stimulate blood circulation. Bitter roots and berries could provide the necessary boost to help the body fight the cold. Every tree and every bush was seen as a potential ally in the struggle for life. Nature was harsh, but it also provided the tools for survival. Surviving alone in the cold rain was considered the highest manifestation of a warrior's skill. Returning to camp after such a night, a person earned the special respect of his tribesmen. It was proof that he fully understood the language of nature and knew how to negotiate with it. Such trials tempered character and prepared men for the most difficult military campaigns. In a world without modern technology, knowledge was the most valuable asset that could not be taken away. And this knowledge was passed down by word of mouth, preserving the lives of entire peoples. Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about how Native Americans viewed rain on a mental level? For many tribes, rain was not just a natural phenomenon, it was perceived as a visit from powerful spirits. Thunderbirds. This attitude dictated specific behavior. During a storm, it was forbidden to make noise, laugh, or show disrespect for the elements. It was believed that fear attracted lightning and cold, so calmness was a mandatory quality. This psychological attitude helped people keep a clear head in situations that could cause panic in an unprepared person. Rituals and songs also played a role in the tribe's survival in the rain. The elders sang special songs that were supposed to appease the spirits and hasten the end of the bad weather. These actions united people, gave them a sense of control over the situation, and reduced overall stress levels. When all members of the community are engaged in a common cause, whether it be prayer or strengthening the tipi, time passes more quickly and the cold is less noticeable. Collective faith was as real a force as the fire in the hearth. The Indians lived in a world where the physical and spiritual were inextricably linked. There were also practical prohibitions associated with rainy weather. For example, it was forbidden to touch certain metal objects or go out onto open hills without extreme necessity. The people of the plains were well aware of the danger of lightning, which often accompanied rainstorms. The experience of many generations crystallized into a set of taboos that saved lives. These rules were strictly observed, as the price of a mistake on the prairie was always too high. Discipline was the foundation of safety for every nomad. In the next chapter, we will discuss how Native Americans coped with the aftermath of floods and river overflows after prolonged rains. You will learn how water could turn familiar trails into impassable traps. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how the great rivers of the prairies changed the course of history for entire tribes? Prolonged rains in the upper Missouri or Arkansas often led to flash floods that could take a tribe by surprise. Rivers that could be forded in the summer would turn into roaring torrents, carrying trees and rocks in a matter of hours. This created enormous problems for moving camp and hunting. Native Americans developed unique methods for crossing such obstacles, using inflated animal skins and improvised rafts. The ability to read the water was as important a skill as the ability to read animal tracks. One of the most famous designs for such occasions was the bull boat. a round vessel made of willow branches covered with raw buffalo hide. These boats were light, stable, and could carry significant loads, including children and the elderly. Due to their shape, they did not capsize on rapids, but simply bounced off the rocks. It was the perfect way to cross a flooded river when there were no bridges. The tribe could quickly evacuate from the flooded area, keeping all their stuff. The bull boat was a symbol of how adaptable nomads were. The tribe's logistics during the rainy season were a real nightmare for the chiefs. They had to choose campsites on high ground, but close enough to water for drinking. Overly moist soil could cause disease in horses, which were the nomads' main asset. The animals' hooves softened and became vulnerable to infection, requiring special care. Native Americans were excellent veterinarians who knew the power of medicinal herbs and ointments. Caring for the herd on rainy days was a priority for the young men of the tribe. After the rains ended, the prairie was transformed before our eyes. The ground was covered with lush greenery, which attracted thousands of animals. However, for people, this time was also associated with the need to dry all their belongings. Each teepee in the camp was turned into a huge drying room, where skins, clothes, and food supplies were laid out in the sun. This period of recovery was a time of joy and preparation for new journeys. Water gave life, but it also required constant vigilance from people. Preserving food supplies in high humidity was a critical task. Pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries, was the main food that could be stored for years. However, even it could spoil if water got inside the leather bags. The Indians used special containers called parfleche, made of stiff rawhide. These boxes were virtually airtight and protected food from rain and rodents. The ability to pack supplies properly determined the success of long winter journeys. It was impossible to dry meat in the rain, so on rainy days the tribe switched to consuming pre-made supplies. This required strict rationing and discipline. The women of the tribe were the main keepers of resources, knowing how much food was left and how many days it would last. If the rain lasted for a long time, difficult times began, when even leather clothing or harnesses had to be eaten. Such cases were rare, but they are recorded in the oral history of many peoples. Dampness also affected food preparation. During rainy weather, people tried not to cook dishes that produced a lot of steam so as not to increase the humidity inside the tipi. Preference was given to baking on coals or eating dried meat in its pure form. The smoke from the fire inside the teepee served as a natural preservative for the meat hanging from the ceiling. Thus, even in inclement weather, the process of preparing food for the future continued. Every minute of time was used to the maximum benefit of the community. Storing seeds for future planting, among agricultural tribes such as the Mandan or Iroquois, required even more effort. Grain was stored in special pits coated with clay and fired with fire. Moisture was the main enemy of the harvest, as it caused rot and mold. The Indians developed complex ventilation and waterproofing systems for their storage facilities that were on par with European technologies of the time. Caring for the future was the foundation of the culture of all the indigenous peoples of America. In warfare, rain was often a decisive factor, giving one side an advantage. A wet bowstring made of tendons lost its elasticity and could break at the most crucial moment. Therefore, warriors always carried spare bowstrings, hidden in waterproof covers. With the advent of firearms, rain became even more dangerous, as black powder instantly became damp and useless. In such conditions, Indians armed with cold weapons and tomahawks often defeated soldiers with guns. Tracking in rainy weather became a real art. Water quickly washed away footprints on soft soil, but it left specific marks on plants and stones. An experienced warrior could determine how long ago a troop had passed by the way water droplets ran off the trampled grass. This knowledge allowed Native Americans to escape pursuit or, conversely, to find the enemy in the most difficult conditions. The forest and prairie spoke to those who were ready to listen. During long military campaigns, rain forced warriors to show incredible endurance. Sleeping on wet ground without lighting a fire so as not to reveal their presence was commonplace. Every man was prepared for such trials from childhood, strengthening his body and will. It was believed that a true warrior did not notice cold or hunger until his goal was achieved. This Spartan training made Native Americans some of the most effective fighters in human history. After battle, rain was often seen as a cleansing. Water washed away not only physical dirt, but also the spiritual burden of war. Many tribes had rituals of purification after returning from a campaign, in which natural water played a key role. Thus, the circle was complete. The element that could kill ultimately gave new life and peace. Understanding this duality of nature was fundamental to the worldview of all tribes from Missouri to the Rocky Mountains. As we conclude our analysis, it is important to understand that the survival of Native Americans in the rain was not simply a struggle against circumstances. It was a conscious dialogue with the world, based on a deep knowledge of biology, physics, and psychology. The indigenous peoples of North America proved that humans can not only exist in harsh conditions, but also create a high culture and complex social structures there. Rain was just one of the teachers that tempered their character and honed their technology. Today, we can learn a lot from these peoples. Their ability to use minimal resources to achieve maximum safety is something that modern society often lacks. We have become accustomed to relying on electricity and plastic, forgetting the power of simple materials such as leather, wood, and fat. The story of survival in a teepee amid the sound of rain reminds us of the importance of family ties and collective responsibility. Without the support of the tribe, no Native American could have withstood the fury of the Thunderbirds. Every element of Native American life was thought out to the smallest detail. From the slope of the teepee walls to the composition of the fat used to waterproof moccasins, everything had logic and meaning. This harmony with the environment allowed them to live on this land for millennia without destroying it. Rain was part of this balance, a necessary element of life that simply had to be learned to respect and understand. And in this understanding lay their true strength. We hope this story has helped you take a fresh look at the history and culture of the great peoples of America. Their lives were full of dangers, but it was these dangers that made them who we know them to be: proud, wise, and incredibly resilient people. The path of the warrior and hunter always lay through storms and downpours, and every step on that wet grass was a step toward the immortality of their culture. We saw how a common weather phenomenon turned into a complex challenge for an entire civilization. The survival tactics of Native Americans in freezing rain are a textbook of wisdom written by nature itself. Which of the Indians' precautions did you find most surprising? The use of an inner canopy in the teepee, or the impregnation of leather with buffalo fat? Tell us what you think in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be the first to learn about the exciting details of the life and customs of the indigenous peoples of North America. Suggest topics for future videos. We will definitely listen to them. Stay dry and strong. See you next time.